The world woke up today to some pretty stunning news. News that could completely change the course of the war in the Middle East. But what looks like a big breakthrough on the surface, well, when you start to peel back the layers, the situation gets a whole lot more complicated and a whole lot more fragile. So, let's get into it.
So here it is. President Trump drops this bombshell on social media, announcing that after he'd been talking with Lebanese President Joseph Aoun and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, they've agreed to a 10-day ceasefire. This is, a huge deal. It's the first real diplomatic pause we've seen in the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon.
And that right there is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Is this a genuine step toward peace? Or is it just a tactical timeout while the major players catch their breath and regroup? To really understand that, we have to look past Lebanon and focus on where the real standoff is happening. Yeah, see, this ceasefire isn't really about Lebanon. That's kind of the side story. The main event, the thing this is all revolving around, is an incredibly tense, high-stakes negotiation going on between the United States and Iran. And honestly, the entire region is just holding its breath. And at the absolute heart of these talks, it all comes down to one thing: Iran's nuclear program. That's the core issue. It's the obstacle that has brought these two countries right to the edge of what could be a really devastating war. Now, what's so fascinating here is just how far apart the two sides still are. I mean, look at this. On one side, you've got the U.S. demanding a 20-year pause on uranium enrichment, and they want all of Iran's highly enriched uranium gone. But Iran's coming back with, whoa, how about 3 to 5 years? And we'll only get rid of part of our stockpile. That is a massive, massive gap to bridge. And yet, despite that huge gulf between them, you get this from President Trump today. He's sounding incredibly optimistic, right? He's making it sound like a historic deal is basically done, that Iran is ready to give in. But, well, that's not quite the whole picture. Because almost at the exact same time, you get this message from media linked to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, the IRGC, and they are just flat out denying any reports of progress. What this really shows you, what it throws into sharp relief, is the deep division inside the Iranian regime itself. You have hardliners who seem ready to torpedo any kind of compromise. Okay, so while the diplomats are talking, there's a whole other part to this strategy we need to look at, because this diplomacy isn't happening in a vacuum. At the same time, the U.S. is applying some serious pressure, both with its military and its economy. So how much pressure are we talking about? Check out this number: $435 million. That's the estimated cost to the Iranian regime per day from the U.S. Naval Blockade, which has brought its maritime trade to a grinding halt. That is just a staggering economic hit. And this blockade isn't just about stopping oil shipments. The U.S. Navy is out there boarding ships looking for what they call contraband. And we're not just talking about weapons. The real goal here seems to be choking off the basic materials, things like steel and aluminum, that Iran needs to build up its military-industrial base. Now, Iran's not just sitting back and taking this. They're definitely using this pause to their advantage, clearing out debris from damaged missile bases, trying to get their forces back in order. But, and this is a big but, rebuilding their major industrial centers is a much, much harder problem to solve. So it's really a race against time for everybody involved. So we've talked about the high-level strategy, the geopolitics, the chess match. But it is so important to remember that behind all this maneuvering, there is a devastating human cost. This isn't a game. It's having a very real and very tragic impact on millions of ordinary people, and especially on children. And we know this because of a brand new report from UNICEF that paints a really grim picture of this humanitarian crisis. The numbers we're about to go through come directly from their work on the ground across the region. First up, just a gut punch of a number. Over 2,200 children have been reported killed or injured since this all escalated. And beyond the direct casualties, the conflict has created this massive internal crisis. Inside Iran alone, an estimated 3.2 million people have been driven from their homes. And get this, of those millions of people forced to flee, a shocking 864,000 are children. Just let that sink in for a second. That's nearly 1 million children displaced inside Iran, their entire lives just turned upside down. So where is this happening? This chart gives us a breakdown of those reported child deaths by location. And you can see it right there. The overwhelming majority have been in Iran and Lebanon. It's a tragic reminder of where this conflict is hitting civilians the absolute hardest. And in the middle of all this chaos, you have aid agencies like UNICEF on the ground doing everything they can. They're delivering life-saving supplies to families who have lost absolutely everything. But the scale of the crisis is just immense, and their resources are stretched to the absolute limit.
So, let's step back. Where does all of this leave us? We've got this 10-day ceasefire, which sounds like progress, but it's really just a clock that started ticking. It hasn't actually solved any of the fundamental, deep-seated problems that got us here in the first place.
And this unstable situation leaves a bunch of huge unanswered questions on the table. Israel's demanding that Hezbollah be disarmed. Is that even possible? Then there's the big one. Can the US and Iran actually close that massive gap on the nuclear deal? And what about the hardliners in both Iran and Israel, who could derail this fragile peace at any moment? And of course, what happens to the economic blockade if these talks fall apart? You can just see how easily this whole thing could collapse.
Which brings us right back to where we started. We've seen the high-stakes diplomacy, the crushing military pressure, and the horrific human cost. But the question we're all left with is what we're watching a real turning point, a genuine chance for peace, or is it just a pause, a brief, deceptive quiet before an even bigger storm?